Unleash the fury of the ancients as you spin through hordes of demons, shredding everything in your path. Welcome to the Maxroll channel. I'm your host Kondyss, and this is my Whirlwind Barbarian for Diablo 4's Season 4. Mid-season patch introduced heavy buffs to the Dust Devil's aspect. It leaves deadly tornadoes all around the character while channeling Whirlwind. This high base damage can be scaled in many ways, but I will introduce you to the most popular one. Starting with the aspect of Berserker Ripping that allows Dust Devils to inflict bleed. Damage over time effects can't critically strike in Diablo 4, but as Barbarians we have access to the Gushing Wounds key passive. The bleeding damage we inflict will be multiplied by the amount of our critical strike damage. This is what prompts us to put it in every offensive piece of gear and use a Grandfather. The only exception is the damage while berserking temper on the two-handed bludgeoning weapon. It is mandatory to cap the multiplicative bonus from Blood Rage. The last important part is Hemorrhage. With this setup, we get nearly 50% multiplicative damage to the vulnerable enemies. With all those things combined, we can make anything work, especially Dust Devils, whose damage we can boost even higher with Fierce Winds aspect and Twister Glyph. We keep our single target damage high with the addition of Earthquakes, which we create by leaping with Bulkatos aspect equipped. The bonuses themselves comes from the Earthquake aspect and Rumble Glyph. Keep in mind that we don't need Earthquakes created by Ground Stomp to get those bonuses. Earthquakes created by Leap will work too. And also remember that while I'm highlighting the absolute min-max version of this build, you can find other variants with less and no Ubers in the planner. Assign your Whirlwind to the two-handed slashing weapon and use a two-handed mace in the arsenal slot. It will allow you to gain more fury while hitting enemies for better resource management. This way you will create more Dust Devils due to the devilish aspect, which will result in higher damage output. Skill trees for Dust Devil Barbarians are very similar, but I will explain the non-intuitive things. Also, my skill rank values are higher than usual due to the Harlequin crest equipped, over the ability to see its real value. First thing you will notice is Lunging Strike. This skill will not be on the skill bar, but we need to spend 2 points to progress further into the skill tree. Next part is not really important to us too, since we deal damage with Dust Devils, not the Whirlwind itself. Put points into Whirlwind and take Furious upgrade so that you can puff further. Rallying Cry will be our main source of Fortify, and Imposing Presence will boost your life to terrific amounts. Next, take Warcry for more damage and put 5 points into Leap. With aspect of Giant Strides and enough cooldown reduction, your ability will reset every time you hit 2 enemies or a boss, making it one of the fastest builds in the game. On the Weapon Mastery skill wheel, we take nearly all passives. Counter-offensive and defensive stance grant us bonuses while being fortified. Cut to the Bone multiplies our bleed damage to vulnerable enemies, and Pit Fighter is always a good choice since it grants damage and damage reduction in one node. Our ultimate skill of choice is Wrath of the Berserker. It gives us all sorts of buffs, so we use it every time it's off cooldown. We also put a hefty amount of points into Heavy-Handed. It multiplies our critical strike damage, which forces us to play this build with two-handed weapons. For the key passive, we choose Gushing Wounds for its bleed and crit interaction, which I have explained in the first part of the guide. In Season 4, the meta for Paragon Boards shifted to collect as many multipliers as possible. Depending on your build, it will be mainly done by glyphs and legendary nodes. That is why you can often see snakes like this one with 6 or 7 boards attached. We start with Twister, which gives us tons of Dust Devil damage and a bonus multiplier after creating a Dust Devil. As for the time of making this guide, this multiplicative damage is bugged and does not work, but the glyph itself is still a very good choice. Next board is Bonebreaker, which contains Exploit Glyph and a huge amount of maximum life. On Warbringer we use Wrath and take every dexterity node possible to boost its damage to the maximum. If you have a problem capping out your resistances, consider taking nodes around the conditioned node. Moving on to Blood Rage. We take Legendary Node itself and put Rumble Glyph for bonus damage while standing on Earthquake. That's what really makes this build efficient while fighting bosses. We can place 7 or 8 Earthquakes at the same time and stack the bonuses each time. Next is Carnage, where we use Might boosting our damage and damage reduction values. On Decimator, opt for Ire, which gets you to the maximum amount of berserking damage needed in this build. We also take the Legendary Node Decimator itself, since it's already on our path to the next board. This build is tough, but if you need a little bit more life, choose the Restorative Rare Node instead of Destroyer. Lastly, take the Hemorrhage board and path to the Legendary Node. Remember that this build is a very high-end tech. Changing things around may make it work significantly worse. I advise you to follow the steps shown in the guide and planner and make your own version of this build only after understanding every interaction between aspects, abilities and Paragon nodes.